You good?
All right, technical session 32. We're going to focus on technically four versions of Windows specific to the exam. Prior to Windows 7, they don't really get into that, with the exception of an upgrade path.
Vista.
But these are the main four sessions that they do focus on: 7, 8, 8.1, which is the I'm sorry version, and then Windows 10. So we will move along here and take a look at operating systems. We should be able to, at the end of this particular session, be able to describe the purpose and function of an operating system, identify the main features of Microsoft operating systems, and compare and contrast the features of Windows 7, 8, 8.1, and 10. As with dealing with any operating system, because they absolutely and utterly love to move things around with every version, especially that control panel and where they hide all their little menus. Every single version they put out, they put it in a new place, so you have to buy the book or something like that, or find somebody to actually help you with it. We have to remain adaptable. Mess around with these updated versions so that when inevitably our customers come to us and say, hey, where do I go to find this? We know where to go. And maintain future orientation, keeping a lookout for new versions coming down the pipe. If there are beta versions out there, try to get your hands on them so that you can start working with them and being familiar with the new tools and applications that they're going to be putting forward in the future versions, as well as before you go and install something like this across your entire network of your company, test the product. Think ahead, test your product, make sure it's going to work and not going to crash any current applications you have, so that there is no downtime in your business. I'm going to start off first. What exactly is an operating system? Quick and easy answer: it's just an interface between the computer and the user. Manages all the hardware and files so that in such a way that it makes it easy for us to interact and access them. And currently, today, the majority of the operating systems operate off of a Gui interface. Can anybody tell me right off the top of their heads, what does GUI mean?
Graphical user interface.
There you go. Or the older versions, and currently Linux does this as well. What does CLI stand for?
Command line interface.
Command line interface. Very good. We will need to become comfortable with both. So it's not just enough to know how to create a file per se in Windows. We would need to be able to create a directory or a file as well in the command line. Being able to interact with the internet and testing our NIC, our DNS servers, making sure everything's working, not only being able to do that in the GUI interface, but also in command line. Command line is a huge help in troubleshooting and trying to solve a lot of these issues. Key components that we need to be aware of. Go, somebody speaking?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have a question.
Okay.
What about DOS? DOS, can we see that?
DOS?
Right. Yeah, DOS. Disk operating system.
That is essentially the command line interface for the Windows system. That would be DOS. I don't know if they particularly call it that. They just call it command line right now. But that was the original interface, was QDOS.
Yeah, disk operating system. Yeah, I was just.
It's still there. Commands haven't changed much, and we still use it.
But it's not as friendly as the operating systems that sit on top of it. Moog, it's like the stripped down versus like running safe mode the whole time. The least that you can do, but you have to be more in tune to those commands to know how to work it. So, but it exists. It's there.
Yes, and I absolutely remember when we used to power on the computer, it automatically went into DOS, and then you would have to type in WIN to run the executable file to get into Windows. So, I mean, I remember that time.
Fun times.
I wouldn't go that far, but I do remember when Dune 2 came out. That was a real good year. Lot of wasted time that year. All right, two main components of the operating system would be the kernel and the shell. Who wants to read for me? Mogus, since you were stepping in, go ahead and read that one for us real quick.
Okay. Components of operating systems. Every OS has two main internal components. First, the kernel. This is the core of the OS, as it has the most responsibility in how the user interacts with the hardware. Applications operating under the OS cannot get to hardware devices without the shell passing the requests to the kernel. Second, the shell provides commands and procedures that programs use to do the action they need. This is done through different interface tools, such as the control panel or window explorer, that have an icon-driven interface for the user to click. Example, if an OS is a restaurant, the shell is the wait staff that serves the diners, and the kernel is the cook staff that prepares the diner's dinner request.
I do like that particular analogy because it is a pretty succinct way to describe the interaction between those two particular pieces of the operating system and how they interact with each other. So it's a good one to remember, where, you know, the shell is like the waiter running back and forth between the kernel and you, giving you the information you need, and you have the kernel, which is like basically overall controlling what's, you know, going to be going out, and then you are the patrons of the restaurant requesting those applications and information that you want. Questions so far? All right. Now, various categories, they break it down into two pretty general ones of operating systems that function for both the software and the hardware. You have your basic server, which is, you know, a shared resource amongst a whole bunch of other computers. And a server doesn't necessarily have to be a dedicated computer. It can be a particular computer on a network. Like the computer I'm operating on now can essentially be a server for the rest of the house, them going and utilizing those resources for whatever they need, be it, you know, files, can get to printers, things like that. It operates kind of like a server in that sense. You have a workstation, which allows the end users access to the information and applications on the server, as well as can be an independent unit on top of that with an optimized foreground for processing. You have mobile devices, which is generally like your tablets, your phones, things of that nature, which are going to use a more stripped down version of an operating system because they will not have the onboard computing power to be able to operate a regular operating system. You might be able to get something to run a full version of, say, Ubuntu or something like that. But for something like Windows and Mac OS, which is going to be a lot more processing intensive, it's not going to be able to function because of the power requirements and limitations with regards to the mobile devices. So they will use a much more basic version of that operating system, but will still allow for some interaction. Then you have cloud-based operating systems like Google, and it would store essentially the information for you, have a operating system on the other end. You would have a basic one on your unit that would reach out and connect and set up off of that particular cloud system and operate there. Questions so far on the four basic operating system categories? Ooh. All right. Basically, the main function we use operating system for is to manage resources. It provides us a way to interface with the various things, files, videos, music, applications, anything that we particularly need to use to be productive in our work or entertain ourselves on the computer, be it games, what have you. The operating system essentially is just a main interface between us and it, making it easier for us to communicate. If we didn't need that, we would have stayed in command line and just, you know, gone through the directories that way, found out what we needed, execute those files, manipulate through it. But when they were utilizing that, very few people were actually interacting with the computers because they didn't find it very user-friendly. It wasn't very intuitive. So they had to move towards more GUI systems, point and click. A lot more people were kind of brought into the fold with regards to computers and now able to actually utilize these programs, and the productivity on them became more apparent, and it started becoming more and more a part of our daily lives. And most of the time, you're using it for managing your files, applications, hardware, what have you. It is essentially just that main interface, and we put other things in it to utilize it. Questions so far? All right. Most used operating systems. Not a big shocker right up there. Microsoft Windows, taking up about 90% of the current market. And this has been the case for quite some time. Mac OS or OS X, though they have a really good advertising budget and they appear to be everywhere, as of when it comes down to basic numbers, I think they're still less than 10%. They may have cracked that 10% at this point, but not as big of a chunk of the market as you might have thought right off the top of your head. Linux, I believe, is less than 3%. And then there is less than 1% left of other various operating systems that there are out there in the market. So, similar to the iPhone operating systems, if you remember, biggest player was Android with over 85%, and Mac, then Linux, and it kind of filters down there. But the vast majority of the market tends to be in one location. Now, various Windows versions throughout time. There was the ever popular favorite Windows XP, built off of the Unix platform, was hands down the most popular and used version of Windows for the longest time. In fact, the only way they were able to get the majority of businesses to update to a newer version was to actually stop servicing it entirely on a security level. That was the final push that the other companies needed to move away from it. Otherwise, nobody was going to even give any of the newer ones a chance. There was Windows Vista, which was pretty universally hated. Most people didn't like it because they were moving up from XP to Vista. They didn't like the way it interacted. They didn't like the way it functioned. So it wasn't on the market very long before they jumped to Windows 7, which was essentially just reskinning Vista a little bit, but it was a lot more well accepted than Vista was itself. And then they took an extreme left turn and went to Windows 8, which was somewhere along the lines of, I want my cell phone and my computer to operate off of the exact same operating system and to look the same in both places. This really did not go over well with the Windows community. And very, very shortly after it was originally released, they released Windows 8.1, which went back to a more familiar skin, similar to Windows 7, and allowed people's interactions to be pretty close to what they were prior, although they did maintain some of the Windows applications that they had in 10, but they put it in the menu versus being all over your desktop. And then obviously the most recent iteration of Windows 10, which they are still currently operating off of and updating. But the three main ones covered by the exam are 7, 8, 8.1, and 10. Those are the main ones you need to be aware of and understand the differences between. Questions so far? All right. Main features of a Microsoft operating system. in a pretty broad sense. You have your overall desktop, which is essentially what you're looking at when you first turn that computer on. You have your file explorer, which allows you to search through the various files and applications within the computer, try to locate them kind of pretty quick. You have your support tools, the two different versions of each of the particular windows. I think up until 10, you could have a 32-bit version or a 64-bit version with different system requirements for each one. You had various security tools and event viewers to see. You can go back and look if anything has happened to your computer. You can go back and look at those particular events and see what systems were affected and what possibly was the cause of those particular issues. And then we have Ready Boost as well. All right, Windows Desktop. Essentially, that is the primary tool provided by the shell, which is our waiter, and can be customized visually. I think you can, up until 7, I believe you could even make your Windows skin look like Windows 3.1 if you wanted to. I mean, you could go back that far. If you're more comfortable with the previous version, you can make that particular version look and operate as if it was that previous version to make it a little bit easier for you to adapt to the newer one. Many of the desktop components that you will typically see, you have your start menu, which will be on your bottom left-hand corner. You have the ability to pin and unpin. If you have applications that you use on a very, very regular basis, it's worthwhile for a speed's sake to just pin it to the bottom of the desktop itself so that it has ready access. And if you don't use it on a regular basis, you can unpin it so it's not clogging up your toolbar on the bottom. And you have gadgets. The fun feature was in Windows 7. They got Arrow, which is essentially a transparency of the window, like in the back part of the window. They have a picture kind of show it. Unfortunately, I'm on a Mac, so I can't show you on my computer. Charms, which we will also get into, taskbar notification area, which is in your bottom right, and then the ability to personalize as you see fit. All right, here is the Windows 7 desktop. Get my annotator here. You can see right here, the top of the toolbar, where it's a little translucent, you can kind of see through it. That is what they call the arrow function. That was one of the, what they consider to be one of their major upgrades. If you're one of those people that absolutely loves to clog up your desktop, you can create a bunch of files on your desktop to get it set up the way you want it. Here is the notification area down in the bottom right, where, you know, if you have any issues like a loss of internet connectivity, security threats, time, the ability, you know, what networks you want to connect to, all of that stuff will show up down in this bottom right-hand corner in the notification area, otherwise known as the system tray. That is a test question. They will ask you what is the name of the notification area on the Windows desktop. So just to kind of give you a heads up on that. Bottom taskbar lets you know exactly which applications you have open at any given time. And then further over to the left, you would have your most commonly used ones pinned there so that you can continue to find them easy without having to go search for them or creating a shortcut to your desktop, clogging it up. However you see fit, you can put those down there and it makes it just a lot easier to hit those programs without having to look them up. Then you have your infamous start button right here. It's like the Windows icon, allows you access to all your other menus. Questions so far? This is just the desktop for Windows 7. How many people here actually use Windows 7? Got one.
So they got rid of it at work.
Yeah, one, two. I actually never used it. So when I actually came in training for 10.02, 10.01, 10.02 for A+, I had never used Windows 7, 8, 8.1, or 10. Because at my office, we stopped at Vista. That was the last one we did. And then I operated on a Mac at home. So I literally had to learn all of this for the 10.02 because I'd never operated on these particular systems. There's that lovely Windows 8 menu. So 8, 8.1. The start menu is removed in 8. And the desktop was replaced with this new look with the tiles. And they called that Metro UI. That was the new interface when they got rid of the start menu and started utilizing these particular tiles. It was essentially, like we'd stated earlier, they basically wanted you to have your smartphone or your tablet and your computer all running off of the exact same operating system. Now, that sounds wonderful for a phone where you have the increased functionality of an operating system on a phone, but that is a really stripped down operating system to operate off of a desktop. And there was a huge list or a huge loss in functionality. People didn't like the interactions with the tiles, and just for the most part did not go over too well. But you still see the tiles to this day being utilized in the start menu of Windows 10. All right, here's the most familiar one for a lot of us, which is the Windows 10 desktop. And as you can see here, still utilizing the tiles, but a much more streamlined version. And Windows 10 has actually been quite popular. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, Marvin, didn't they say they were going back to the Unix platform after this one?
There was some talks about that, but we are okay. Why would they go to anything else if Windows 10 works? Anybody got the quick answer to that? Always, Avery. Is the same reason why until somebody call out that hotel, they're gonna have those wires hanging on the freaking sprinkler system. It's one of those things where you have to continue to make modifications to keep those. It's not even really the end users. I don't even think it's much so the end users as it is some of the big corporations, because once those updates stop, or if they don't have a pay-to-play program platform for those upgrades, how else can we continue to milk,
Yeah.
So yeah, but Windows 10 is still solid, and I think we still at least 4 more years or more before we even touch it.
Well, I mean, no, I mean, they're still going to use that same look for Windows 10, but what they're saying is like that backbone platform, they're talking about switching over to Linux because of the stability, or excuse me, not Linux, Unix, because of the stability.
Okay.
And that was the huge benefit of Windows XP, was that stability.
Very much so. I had to research that. I did
in a enterprise environment. So that was, if I remembered correctly, that was the talks that that was going on behind the scenes, where they were looking to move back in that direction just because it was much more enthusiastically adopted.
We're gonna have all you guys using Linux. We're just gonna get away from the operating system altogether. Just use Linux.
Yeah, we had a big Linux user in the last one, David.
Yep, David, and also I believe Putnam wanted to get really into it as well. So
that is true. He was moving that way. And of course, Lazaro.
Last.
He was one of our TAs. All right. Start button /menu. Essentially, it's where they hide all the programs, files, access, everything. It's always in that bottom left-hand corner. Gives you the nice little Windows icon. You can either click on that or hit the little window button on your keyboard. If you have a Windows Microsoft keyboard, they tend to, have that nice little addition there for you as a hotkey. Will let you get to your libraries, search functions, control panels, applications. And for pretty much, with the exception of 8, which got rid of it, it's always in this bottom left-hand corner and one click away, or you can hit the hotkey on your keyboard. Let's see here. Pinning and unpinning. Again, that was what we're talking about for heavy use files. Like if every day you come in, you have to log into, your Citrix VPN in order to be able to connect to your office and to be able to log into the servers and start using your virtual desktop or something like that. If you're using Citrix every single day, you're not going to want to go into your start menu and look it up every single day. So you're just going to go ahead and just pin that application right to your taskbar down on the bottom, so that it's just right there. It's hotkeyed, ready to go, and you don't necessarily have to create a shortcut to your desktop in order to make that happen. So this would just be like 4 or 5 of your really top used programs. If you don't use Windows Edge, you can unpin Windows Edge, replace it with a Brave browser or something like that, if that's something you would prefer to use, or a Google Chrome browser or what have you. So questions with regards to pinning and unpinning. Gadgets. They love asking about gadgets. Little mini programs that can be placed on your desktop. In Windows 7, they'll ask you at what Windows app or which Windows version did they begin using gadgets. So it allows you to run them real quickly, small programs like a clock, calendar, or something along those lines, weather, what have you. And as long as 2011, they're no longer supporting the development or uploading of new gadgets. So essentially it is being phased out, but was a pretty widely used tool in the Windows 7 ecosystem. Questions so far? All right, gadgets, Windows 7. Yeah, that's the downfall of Linux, Emmanuel, that every Linux user complains about. If you're a big time gamer, usually doesn't work so good.
It's getting better though, but
It is
nobody's
getting
wanting
better.
to,
Same with,
invest.
yeah, that's what the advent of Steam and things like that are allowing it to be more functional and utilized more. Because like it was really hard to find a popular game on a Mac. There's almost nothing. And now with Steam and stuff like that, and Macs are now even trying to get into the VR game, because the popularity on that's taken off real quick with Quest 2. So we'll see how it develops, but the tides are shifting. They're starting to realize there is a market outside of Windows. All right, this is what we were talking about earlier, which is the arrow. As you can kind of see down here, it is just a transparency in the actual window itself, so you can kind of see what's going on behind it. Just gives you a little bit better viewing angle. And I've never really understood why they considered this a major update, but they do. So, but the arrow functionality is just the, again, transparency of the menu bar at the top of your windows.
Just being
That's
fancy.
they look cool. That's probably why
being fancy.
it's just fancy. All right. Taskbar notification area. Basically lets you know what you got already open. It doesn't necessarily let you know how many of each thing. Like if you have Google Chrome up there, that's not going to tell you that you have 35 windows of Google Chrome open there. It's just going to tell you basically that Google Chrome is open. You would have to click on that to see how many iterations of that or particular windows within the particular application you have open. Over off to the side, where's my annotator? There we go. As you can see, you got your quick launch stuff here where you can pin and unpin items, your currently in use programs, and notification area off to the side over here, which is also called the what?
System
tray.
There we go, systems tray, notification area, AKA system tray. Lets you know if you lose connectivity, security issues, time, things of that nature. Any questions with regards to that? All right. Personalization. Guess from the dawn of Windows 3.1, you were allowed very minimal personalization. You got more and more and more as time went on. What was it? The green fields was like one of the most popular backgrounds they had for the longest time. And that actually was a real place. I think that was Windows. Was that Windows ME?
XP. No, yeah, you're right. Windows ME to Windows XP.
Yeah, the big green fields in the back.
I loved it.
I had that happen I was working during college at a mom and pop retail store, and one of my coworkers calls in a panic because the point of sale system, they had accidentally minimized it and they'd never worked on computers before. And she was literally screaming into the field or screaming into the phone, I can't find it. I can't find it. All I see is green fields. All I'm missing is the cows. And we're having to walk her through it. You know, look down at the bottom of the screen, you know, point, you know, there you go, there's a little box, says this, click on it, and then, oh, thank goodness, because like, I mean, it was absolutely hilarious phone call. I'm just missing the cows from the Windows ME. All right, nowadays, you can personalize a whole bunch of different aspects of it, from screensavers, background pictures, even the appearance of the icons will change for you. Like if you were into steampunk, they would have like a steampunk skin that you could put on there and make everything look like that old Victorian with the copper and all that stuff built into it, you know. Or you could do a more what was that, an engineering one where they would use like the slide rules and the sextants and stuff like that for the various things. So you could personalize it to, you know, something that, you know, you could express your creative side a little bit with regards to the desktops. And you would get to this by right-clicking on the desktop, going to properties, and then it would allow you to pick various styles for your backgrounds or themes. Windows Explorer. This one confused people a lot because you had Microsoft Explorer. You can see right here off to the side. So you had a Microsoft Explorer, which is this little icon right here. And then you had Windows Explorer, which confused people because one got you to the internet and the other one got you to your files. But with regards to the exam, they always refer to it as Windows Explorer. And it's kind of like a search function for your computer to help you kind of look through various file folders in their structure to get to different pieces of hardware, files. If you have administrative access, it would allow you to, you know, set up different file systems for other people operating on the system. And then also within the file, you have the library, which is a centralized location for all of your files from all over, be it from external hard drives, optical drives, internal drives, and the cloud. You could basically have all of these things functional and visible within one particular place. They did fun little things like breaking out your files into music files, even though they're stored in different locations. It will pull up everything in regards to music. If you do it on documents, same thing. It doesn't matter if it's in multiple folders, it'll pull up all your documents. Did it for photos, videos, all kinds of different stuff. And it just made it easy to comb through the material to find the particular files you were looking for. Questions so far on that? All right. I just missed a few here. All right. Essentially, you would have your file structure where users essentially authorized through a user account. You would have the administrator and then your base level users, and you could have several different users operating off the same computer, but you don't necessarily want each user having access to all the files that are located there. Say if you're a small business and you have an accounting person that comes in, you wouldn't, and then they'd come in on every other Saturday to kind of do files. Throughout the rest of the week, you wouldn't want necessarily the operations person who was also working on the computer having access to all the accounting files. So you would be able to break them down so that only the appropriate people would have access to it. General file naming, you have basically two main parts to the file. You have the main part, which kind of identifies the contents of the file, be your title, and then the extension, which would give you the file type. Like if you had an Excel sheet for Acme corporation, it would be Acme Corp second quarter or Q2 file .xls. And that would give you the Excel spreadsheet of that particular file. Or if it's just a text file, it'd be .txt or docx. And then if it was executionable, you would have .exe, and a compressed file .zip. And the path, which you'll hear sometimes referred, like if you're unable to locate a file on a customer, or another IT professional is telling you where to go and you don't know exactly where that's located, you could ask them specifically for the path, which this right here would tell you the path to get to that particular file. First you had, the users, the username, then their desktop, A+, PowerPoint, lessons. Each backslash is a layer in that path, or the next point in that path you're going to go to. And finally, the actual document itself, which is a PowerPoint document, lesson T-32. Just an example of a file path and how you would get there. Questions? Or you could just put this in the search and it will pull it up.
You also can see how easy you can run through those 255 allowable characters too. So it's very easy.
That is true. That is true. All right. Directories kind of give you a hierarchical view where you can kind of click on, say, your desktop right here, and then your desktop, it'll show you the various folders, like overall folders in your desktop. You might have, work PowerPoints, you might have, photos from, you know, soccer or whatever, and then just have multiple the folders on there, and it will give you basically all those folders on the desktop plus any individual files you have there. And then you could from there click onto, say, the work PowerPoints, and then we click on that, and you go in there, and then it would show you 2 folders in there, and say 1001, 1002. Click on 1001, we get in there, and then it'll give us a list of technical sessions. Then we could click on which technical session we wanted to go to. So it's each time you select a particular piece on it, it will take you one layer deeper into the files that are in that section. Questions? It's exciting stuff, guys. All right. OneDrive. It's essentially the cloud storage system for Microsoft. It is proprietary. Who can tell me what Google's version is?
iCloud.
All right.
Google
Is
Drive.
what?
Google Drive.
Look at that. There,
Oh.
Google Drive.
Oh, Google Drive. It's
All right. Now next, what's Apple's version?
iCloud.
There you go. So they will, you know, if you don't want to necessarily store everything on the computer, you can store it in the cloud. They'll give you X amount of free space. I believe it is 5 gigs. I think we talked about this. 5 gigs. And then after that, based on the amount of space you want to require, there will be a monthly fee attached to it. But it does give you an offsite backup of the files if that is something you so require. Questions with regards to OneDrive? All right. There we go. Changing Explorer settings. In the Organize tab on there, you can basically have it look as like a list. You could have it a grid of the individual files. You can change the various, you know, the way it looks, which, you know, makes it a little easier in your eyes. Some of us prefer the list. Some of us prefer the individual files laid out like a grid. It just makes it easier to find the files. It's basically down to personal preference and how you're visually able to identify files quicker if you're not just using a search function. Search will allow you to kind of tweak it a little bit to see if you want to look for a file. Like if you're looking for, you know, technical session 32, but you don't want the PowerPoint, you don't want the videos associated with it, you just want the technical notes behind it. So you could do a search for a TXT file, and then it will limit that search specifically to text files and not bring you the other stuff, you know, clogging up the search function for you. Questions so far? All right. Managing files and folders. Essentially, it can be done from the properties, your attributes to these files. You can organize them in any manner which you see fit. And from the general tab under properties, changes can be made to the file names, where it's stored, the accessibility of the files, whether or not you want it to be accessible to just this particular user, or if you want them accessible to everybody else in that utilizes this computer, is available to all, what level of access they have, whether it's read only, to where they're able to see it, but can't do anything with it. And then you could have read and write, and then execute as well. So there's 3 different levels to which you can set visibility of that particular file, be it on that computer, or if you're storing it on a server or in the cloud, you can make it that way as well. Questions? All right. Security on that particular permissions, that is where you would actually set the permissions for the various users. You can do it for all users, for the whole group, or you can do it for individual users. So if there's like 5 different people who use this particular computer, but you only need 2 of them to be able to read and write and modify, and say the other 3 can only view it, you can set it based on the individual users who have access to this computer and check off which authorities or authorizations they will have with that particular document. All right, if you have restore enabled for recovery of files, the previous versions tab will allow you to kind of go back and look at a previous save if at all possible, but you have to initiate this. Otherwise, it's not an auto activated feature. So if your data is absolutely critical, it's something you definitely want to turn on. That way, if you do save or you accidentally delete something and it's auto saved, you can go back to a previous version, say like, I want to look at the version of this from yesterday or last week or something like that. And then it'll be able to kind of wind back the clock for you and look at those previous versions. Questions so far? All right. Windows support tools. You can either download these or through the installation disk, Microsoft website, various things. They're essentially a laundry list of tools that you can use, like the application compatibility toolkit, upgrade advisor, which will tell you like with the current version you have, you'll be able to upgrade, Windows 7 to, X version of Windows 8.1, and it will let you know what paths are available to you based on the particular versions you currently have. The Microsoft Development Kit, if you're looking to develop applications within the program, you could download something like that, and then that will give you the basics you would need to be able to port over whatever applications you're developing so that they will function on a Microsoft computer. Performance analysis tools, process monitors, things like that. Windows PowerShell, if you're going to want to get into scripting or create scripts for other people in your organization. Various things like that. Any questions so far with regards to Windows support tools? All right, Virtual XP. Now, in order to kind of ease the passing of the beloved Windows XP, many companies just really dreaded doing any kind of update. So they essentially created a virtual XP mode, which you can utilize to run your particular systems. Like if you had homegrown systems that were developed specifically to run on Windows XP, but have not been able to bridge that gap and move it up to Windows 7 to be able to function there, you actually could create or have this set up for yourself for a virtual Windows XP. So you could actually go in and specifically run those programs in that environment so that they would continue to run and not have to scramble to try to update to Windows 7. And this just allowed to bridge that gap between moving, because Windows XP was such a huge part of the enterprise environment for about a decade. But as for any virtual machine, you have to make sure you have the allotted space set aside. 2 gigs of RAM, 15 gigs of hard drive space for each virtual machine you're going to create with regards to Windows XP. Questions so far? So they had Windows Easy Transfer for a while. For those who accounts, essentially when you were in Vista and you want to move to Windows 7, or move 7 to 8, and it allows you to migrate to Windows 10. Because you must use the user state migration tool to kind of figure out and make sure what your pathways need to be. And then this allowed you to maintain all your files and folders and upgrade through the path to get straight to 10. Because unfortunately, it is not necessarily a direct jump. You can't just go from Vista to 10. You're going to have to make 1 or 2 upgrades along the way in order to get there. Especially if you want your files to move along with it. If you want to do a clean install, you got all your files backed up, you're just going to portal them in later. You can just go ahead and do a fresh install Windows 10, wipes everything out, and then you would have to redo it later. But if you want to maintain all the files on the computer, you would have to go through an upgrade path, which we will get into. System restore. They say that this is something that is automatically turned on a Windows machine, but unfortunately, at least in my experience, it is not automatically turned on. So if you have not and you have a Microsoft machine, this is definitely something you want to have turned on just in case you update a driver or you update your operating system or whatever comes through and it crashes a whole bunch of stuff on your computer. This allows you to kind of reset that clock and go backwards to a previous setting in place in time on your computer. So before you run any kind of major update, I recommend it on your personal computer too, but definitely in an enterprise environment, before you run any kind of main update, you create a restore point at this point in time and say, hey, May 3rd, 2:30 at this point, I'm going to take a snapshot of this computer, and any changes I make after this point, if they cause any negative effects, I can always jump back to this point in time. And you can maintain a few different restore points if you like, but always a great feature, especially in an enterprise environment. Have this turned on before any updates are made. Make sure to set a restore point before you initiate those updates. Questions so far? All right. 32-bit versus 64-bit operating system. Somebody give me a break here. Will, can you please read, sir?
Yes. 32-bit and 64-bit is the determinant for the amount of data the processor, CPU, can process effectively. To run a 64-bit version, excuse me, to run a 64-bit version of the operating system, a 64-bit processor must be part of the system architecture, and in most cases, it can also run 32-bit versions. If the system architecture is 32-bit, it will not run a 64-bit operating system or application programs. Another main difference between a 32-bit and 64-bit is how much memory it can recognize and use. A 32-bit systems can only use up to 4 GB of memory, and installing anything more will go unused and unrecognized. The basic information about the computer is shown in the system applet in the control panel. It shows what version of the OS is installed, as well as the computer name, activation status, and system index rating.
Very good, thank you. You don't see very often a 32-bit version of an operating system at this point. It's not to say that you won't come across it, but it is relatively rare. Typically, if you're going to see it, it's probably going to be on a point of sale machine or a thin client or something like that, something that's a little more stripped down and doesn't necessarily need heavier applications. Because as it's stating here, as far as memory is concerned, you max out at 4 gigs of memory, which isn't that much. So more often than not, you don't typically see the 32s, but just bear in mind, the processor needs to be able to handle 64 if you're gonna have 64 on it. If you're running 64 and you want to, you can run a 32-bit if you so choose, but it does not go the other way around. Questions so far? Yes, Will.
Yeah, so the 32-bit, as we're not, it's no longer, it's already fading out, and the majority is 64-bit. So
Correct.
all the operating systems technically are running only, they can only run with Windows Windows operating systems can only run with 64 bits and 32 bits as of right now, but majority are 64. Is that the gist?
Correct. Majority of 64. I don't even think there is a 32-bit version of Windows 10, if I'm not mistaken. So I think Windows 10 is 64 only. So prior versions, 8, 8.1, 7 did have 32-bit versions, but I do not believe there actually is a 64-bit version for Windows 10.
I muted you, Will, and I apologize. I'm going to stop the recording just for a second. Kelly.
Automatic updates, virus protection, all that stuff kind of in one particular location. Also gives you access to the user account control, which we will go over here in just a second, and set up network access protection.
Will, you got a question?
Screen blocked, couldn't see. Yes, Will.
Yes. I just wanted to ask if you can give another brief example of how it works in the workplace again.
Or what would work in the workplace?
The security center.
Security center, that's going to be on an individual basis, likely for the computer, even in the work environment. That's going to really depend on the protocols for your particular IT department, because as updates come out, just because the update comes out on Tuesday does not necessarily mean you're going to download that update on Tuesday, because you're going to want to test it out, make sure it's okay. It's not going to interfere with the computer in any way, but this will kind of let you know, hey, these updates are available. And a lot of times you would block access to this particular portion of the computer from general employees being able to access it, because you don't want them interfering with the firewalls. You don't want them messing around with the virus protection. You want all that stuff to be established and then left alone, because you're going to have a standard operation for each one of these particular things. So in a large business environment, the workers are not going to have access to this particular.
Okay, so there'll be only the IT department, and there'll be only ones have access to the settings and to mess to.
Yes.
But usually they'll set it up where everybody will use it, where it's properly set.
No, they would not set it where everybody will use it. What you'll do is you'll have, all of this stuff preset on an image. So all the different settings you want, you're gonna set, like they'll create an image of, Windows 7, and they will go through and say, okay, all these ports need to be closed off and blocked so that they're not used to access this computer. You're going to go and say, here's the security settings we want on this computer. Here are the basic applications we want downloaded on this computer. And then all that stuff will be preset. You'll create an image. So when you send that out to each individual computer, it is duplicated identically across all of them. And then for most security settings, the average user on that computer is not going to have access. IT is the only ones who are going to have access to that.
Okay, got it.
You don't want them turning it off because it's annoying them.
No, of course. Makes sense, huh? Thank you.
So this would be like if you were helping, say, an individual user, like if you're in a situation where you're helping a coworker at their house, or something like that. Like they work remotely from home, but say their firewalls are interfering with the VPN from talking to the servers. So you'll need to know to go in here and either authorize, that the VPN is allowed to communicate, or turn off the firewall or something along those lines so that the computer can actually communicate with the office. So you may, on a remote work where they have a bring their own device, it's not a company owned device, they're using their personal equipment for it. You'll need to know to go in here to be able to adjust settings.
Got it.
Make sense?
For the remote worker, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Now, kind of touched on this briefly here just a moment ago, is the user access control, where there are a multitude of applications and stuff on the computer where the average employee can do a lot of damage unintentionally or intentionally. And we want to limit their access to those particular files. My previous company was very extreme with this. I couldn't even defragment my hard drive to make sure my hard drive ran more efficiently, because that was considered a blocked application, because they didn't want us running defrag during office hours and slowing down the processing of the computers and possibly, slowing down systems. So they blocked us from even being able to use those applications. I couldn't run a virus scan. I couldn't do anything. If I had any questions, problems, or anything I needed done, I had to contact IT and have them do it for me, even if I already knew how to do it, just because they didn't necessarily want people to have authorization or access to that. And so they went ahead and blocked that access so that as a whole, they don't run into those same problems. Questions? All right. Security, Windows Firewall. In Windows 10, it was updated to be called Windows Defender Firewall. And it can be used to stop any unwanted incoming or outgoing traffic. Now, it was first implemented on Windows Vista, and they've kind of made it a little more robust since then. And with regards to firewalls, especially on individual computers, it always goes back to the security questions that you always want to ask yourself. It is convenience versus security. If you make your firewalls extremely strong and extremely paranoid, that thing's going to be dinging your desktop about every 5 seconds every time any application wants to speak to the internet for any reason, but whether it's just to provide updates or what have you, you're going to have to authorize all of it on a regular basis. And then you're going to, or you can turn it all the way off, and then basically anybody has access to your computer. They can come right in, do whatever they want, cause whatever damage they like, and leave. But at a certain point, you kind of got to find that happy medium where you have the level of security you want and the ease of access that you need. And in your advanced settings, you can set rules, policies, and also monitor the various settings that you have available. Questions with regards to firewalls? All right. We will get into firewalls a little bit more in a later T session, talking about stateful and stateless firewalls. But we will talk about that, I believe, when we get into routers and network devices. All right, here's a brief look at Windows Defender. It was a free anti-malware program that was in Windows 7 and 8 on up. It was originally anti-spyware. And then they went ahead and started adding other features like malware and antivirus as well. Event viewer. In the IT field, this is going to be one of the most valuable windows you will go to look and see what possibly happened with this computer. If a system is crashing, if applications are crashing, if you're having severe system slowdowns, programs are hanging up, freezing, all those various things, you can go here and all of that information is logged. Almost anything you do on a computer at any given time is logged at some point on that computer. And Event Viewer kind of puts it all in one particular place for what's happening on that individual system. It'll allow you to go in and see what exactly was being used at the time the crash happened, so you can start isolating where the problems are. Questions so far with regards to Event Viewer? Almost anytime they're talking about logs anything along those lines, event viewer is where you're going to want to go to look at it. All right. Ready Boost. Added this feature, I guess, Windows 7 and all other subsequent versions allow this. It kind of allows you to use a USB drive temporarily as additional RAM for the system. Yeah, you can use SD cards, compact flash, USB. USB is the most common. And thinks it needs a minimum of 256 megs free space, but like if you have a system that's lagging pretty badly and you just want a quick, easy fix temporarily to kind of give you some additional RAM for the system to write to, you can create a Ready Boost drive, and it will offer up some relief in that particular manner, although it is relatively inefficient. But again, it buys time until you can do the upgrades.
Anybody else? Anybody ever use this at all in here? Yay or nay? I attempted it, but I didn't see a significance in performance. Mainly probably because I couldn't push my system to try to show that. When it went slow, it went slow. When I wasn't pushing it, it was just what it was. So maybe there are some instances where this actually works, you know, can be a benefit, but like Kelly just said, it's pretty inefficient. And if you notice, like nobody else in here has used it. It's not something that's readily pushed. It's just an option that's available.
Yeah, again, it's just like if you're running tight on memory, you got a lot of system lag. This is just a way to kind of temporarily ease that pressure until you can make upgrades to the system or replace the system, however your company wants to handle it. It's just a feature that they like to promote as well. All right. 8.1 and 8 specific features. Um, 8.1 or 8 made it so you pretty much had to have a touch screen, or it was much more beneficial to actually have a touch screen, but the market wasn't really ready to adopt that technology at that point in time for desktops in general. Even to this day, you know, it's still not the overwhelming majority that has touch screens on their particular desktop. 8.1 made it a little bit easier to kind of go back to not having to have that touch screen. They saw the launch of the Windows Store where you could go in, buy applications, games, various things like that. And they had a ton of stuff that was free on there as well. Allowed you to kind of, you know, search through, find things that would make you more productive, more fun, you know, creativity, however, you know, you wanted to go. You could do your Microsoft Live sign in, which was essentially a free a free account you could get at that time. And it could synchronize that desktop. If you're using multiple systems, you could have it essentially synced between all those systems. If you had multiple computers in your house, like a desktop, laptop, or your kids have one, and you just kind of want everything essentially operating essentially the same, knowing when everything's on it, you could use Windows Microsoft Sign In for that. And then side-by-side app allowed you to run a Metro application and the desktop application at the exact same time, or up to 4 Metro apps, which were those fun tiles. Questions so far with that? All right. Windows 10 specific features. App Locker was a big one. Allows you to essentially create group policies to control access to those particular applications, and which was wonderful. You didn't have to have the exact same, requirements for everybody across the board. You could say accounting, you have, access to these applications and these servers. Operations, you have access to these applications and servers. HR is going to have a little bit more of an overarching access, so you could have individual group policies for each one of those, and that way you don't have to create an individual image for every single user. You could create group images for individual, for each department, making it a little bit more efficient when creating new desktops for new employees or employees that are moving to new positions. Branch cache, that's a nice one here. If you have certain documents that are going to be repeatedly accessed on the servers on a branch level, like if we had operations in Spartanburg and we had HR here in Jacksonville, we're going to have different requirements with the files we're going to be accessing, but home office is in Memphis. So both of us need to access, the documentation on a pretty regular basis. We're going to be accessing different documentation. So employee rosters and reviews and stuff like that, that would probably be in the branch cache in Jacksonville where we handle HR. Accounts receivable and accounts payable might be in the branch cache for Spartanburg, as they have the accounting departments there. And then you have direct access. Provides a method for essentially setting up automatic connection to a VPN between the client and the main office. Questions so far? All right. I believe that brings us to the end. We should now be able to describe the main purpose of an operating system, specifically Microsoft Windows, identify the main features of the Microsoft operating system, compare and contrast the features of 7, 8, 8.1, and 10. Any questions with regards to that? This is just basically an introduction into what was 10.02 or what will be 10.02.